Right, good afternoon. Sorry, I thought it was a few minutes later than that, so I apologise.
Well, my lord.
Yes, Mr. Gill.
Yes, my lord. The next witness is Marion McParland.
Now, good afternoon, Miss McParland. Please take a seat. Thank you. Make yourself as comfortable as you can. And when you're ready, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, my lord. Hello, Mr. McParland.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you.
Your full name, please?
Marion McParland.
Yes. And the inquiry has your details and your contact address, so if we need to get in touch with you, we can do it through your solicitors or directly, but we have those that information. You're here to tell us about your mother.
Yes.
And we're not going to name your mother, so please, just if you will just refer to her as your mother or mum, presumably is how you would normally call her. If you can just be careful about that, and again, also if you don't name other people, so people who may have cared for your mother, if you don't name them, please. Now, I'd like to ask you a little bit about you, please, to begin with. You're a retired nurse.
Yes, that's correct.
And you were in nursing for 41 years.
Yes, correct.
You retired in March 2017.
Yes.
Yeah. And you set out your nursing background and your qualifications and the posts you had in paragraph 4 of your statement.
Yes.
Which will come up on the screen in front of you as we go through. Can I ask you just a little bit about your the later posts that you held in nursing? You tell us at the bottom of this, actually 2 parts to paragraph 4, but you tell us at the bottom of the first part that you were fortunate to secure a number of senior posts in NHS Lanarkshire, including being a research nurse, a public health nurse, lead for multi-agency inspection of children's services, and an acting senior nurse for public health.
Yes.
So you've got a background in public health.
Yes.
And then you tell us in the next section of paragraph 4, in 2011 you obtained a secondment to the Scottish Government Carers Policy Branch.
That's correct, yeah.
And you took up a post as an implementation manager for the National Carers Strategy of Scotland. And then you secured latterly a post as an education advisor with the NHS Education for Scotland. And you took early retirement in 2017. Can you tell us just a little bit about your work with the Carers Policy Branch and also the National Carers Strategy? What did that involve?
Yeah, I was on secondment. I was seconded from NHS Lanarkshire, where I was working, to Carers Policy Branch in the Scottish Government. There had been a unpaid carers, we're talking about a carers strategy produced. And there was many parts to the strategy in relation to looking after unpaid carers, identifying health needs, supporting unpaid carers and young carers. So this was compiled as a strategy, and my post was to basically implement this strategy, look at the action points, work across Scotland, So I worked with health boards and local authorities across Scotland to really see how they were identifying carers and unpaid carers in each local authority and health board area, what supports were in place, how did they raise awareness, how did they identify, and what I ended up doing actually was we identified a named person within each of the 14 health board areas and 32 local authority areas, and we came together as groups on many occasions with these identified leads and discussed the support and care of unpaid caregivers.
Right. Well, I think that's very interesting for a variety of reasons, but not least because you bring to this inquiry a perspective both of having experience in public health and also having experience of policy work, at least, in relation to unpaid carers in particular.
Yes.
Yep. Right. Your late mum is the person we're going to be talking about. And she passed away in October 2020 in Hatton Lee Care Home in Bellshill.
That's correct.
And her cause of death was COVID and dementia.
Yes.
Yeah. And she was 89 when she died.
She was, yeah.
Well, and just to get a little bit of a flavour of your mum, you tell us she was well known in the community. She was been a warden in a large sheltered housing complex. She continued to do volunteer work in the community up until her being 80.
Yes.
And she also received an award from her MSP for her work in the community.
Yes, she did.
Yep. And you say you were very close to both of your parents, and sadly your dad died suddenly in April 2015.
Yes.
Yeah. And at that time, I think you obtained a power of attorney in relation to your mum.
That's correct, yeah.
At that time, were there had been a formal diagnosis of dementia in relation to your mother in 2014.
Correct.
Yeah. And she was 83 at that time, but you say she'd been displaying symptoms for a few years before then.
Yes.
Yeah. And you were aware that her cognitive abilities were deteriorating.
Yes.
And I think you knew that your dad was very concerned about her.
Yes.
Yeah. What was your role in caring for your mum after her diagnosis with dementia?
After her initial diagnosis, my dad was still alive at that time, but Mum wasn't sleeping very well. She was very confused at times, quite disorientated at times, a bit unsteady on her feet. I was having a few falls, was forgetful around medication. So really, as a daughter, first and foremost, I was there with my mum and dad at their own house most days. Obviously I was working, so it could have been an evening, depended on when my days off were, etc. But I would spend most days with my mum and dad. But usually what I would do would take my mum out, give my dad a wee bit of time on his own as well, but to try and distract my mum. And plus we were good friends together. We enjoyed the shops, and she enjoyed looking at all the different clothes and things, and maybe I was there sometimes just to kind of not get her to buy some of the things that she was wanting to buy, but yeah, just looking after her just as a daughter would, her mum.
Yeah. But you were not just a daughter, you were a nurse.
Was a nurse, yeah.
So you had that, you brought that ability and capacity to what you were able to help your mother with.
Yeah, I was very concerned about her medications, etc. So I did have quite a bit of input on that side.
You tell us a little bit about how your mother's condition deteriorated, and I don't want to go into the detail of that, but she had a number of others conditions. She was diabetic, she had arthritis, she had certain gastric problems.
Yes.
And she also, she'd had a few falls, I think.
Yeah.
And as you put it in paragraph 12, you were struggling along and doing our best.
Yeah.
And she was obviously at home, at her
She
home
was
then.
at home, yes.
Yep. You've described the events leading up to her being in a care home. Again, I don't want to go through that in detail. We can read that for ourselves. But paragraph 15, you note that the September weekend in 2015 was a turning point.
Yeah.
And then things deteriorated, if I can put it generally, after that. And at paragraph 17, you say that you didn't want your mum to go into a care home. Presumably, did she have sufficient cognitive abilities at that time to know whether she wanted to go into a care home?
No, she didn't at that time.
Yeah, and I think you describe it as a selfless thing that we did for her, for the benefit of your mum and continuity of care. And
Yes.
this is making the decision, a very hard decision, that she should go into a care home.
Yes, absolutely. We had to recognise that we couldn't meet mum's needs.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was, we had to
And
accept.
in fact, as you say in paragraph 17, the consultant who was treating her said it was the best thing for her.
Yes.
So the decision was taken to put your mum into the Hatton Lee Care Home in Bells Hill,
Correct, yeah.
within the Shirel, is it?
Cheryl, yes.
Unit within that care home. And interestingly, and I think I'm saying this a lot now to witnesses, these are things we're hearing from a lot of people. But what you say in paragraph 19 is your caring role didn't stop when your mum went into that care home. And you repeat the point you make about it being a selfless act.
Yeah.
You knew at that time that your mum required 24/7 care and support. And as you say, your mum was your life. You were very close, had a great relationship. And I needed to be with her. And you had what you describe as an unofficial agreement with the care, with the care home, that you would continue caring and share the care for your mum.
Yes.
An unofficial agreement tends to suggest it wasn't something that was written down. Was it just something that was understood between you and the care home?
Yes, I believe that's what it was, although I had a discussion with the unit manager and had said that I was really keen to be with Mum the way I would have been had she been at home, and that I would want to be there daily and share in her care. And there was no disagreement with that with the unit manager. At one point I was told just to get on with my life, which was quite disturbing for me.
Who told you that?
One of the carers.
Okay.
But no, I continued to care for my mum, and there wasn't really any objection. I became what I felt was an integral part of her care team, albeit first and foremost my mum's daughter.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we can probably understand is that there's a difficulty for many people in putting their parents into a care home to be cared by somebody else.
Yes.
Yeah. And you make that point in paragraph 19 of your statement. Again, I don't want to take you through. We can read what you said about your mother. There's some interesting history of your mother in paragraph 24 of your statement that, as you put it, she was quite a character.
She was.
And
yes, she was.
she took part in church services. She loved kids coming into the care home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, a note. Yeah, you say at paragraph 27 of your statement that she had, and this is obviously in the care home, she had many unwitnessed falls. And in February 2020, you say she had an awful fall which left her very bruised,
yes.
just put it that way.
Yes.
There was arrangements to have cot sides put on her bed after
yes.
that. Yeah. This, of course, is just before the pandemic struck.
Yes.
And paragraph 29 of your statement, you say, well, perhaps you just read out what you say at paragraph 29 so we get it in your voice.
Okay. I have vivid memories of the last time that I saw Mum before the home shut down. She was still badly bruised and shaken from the fall. In reality, the time that I spent with Mum just before the start of the pandemic was not quality time. For example, taking her out to the shops or home. And ironically, I felt that she needed her family and more looking after than ever before.
Yeah.
Than ever, sorry.
Yeah, and then you say you last saw your mum on the 11th of March 2020, and then the following day you received a call to say that the home was closing to all visitors due to COVID.
That's correct, yes.
And that was the, as you say, that was the last time you held her hand until the day she passed away.
That's correct.
Yeah. Right. Restrictions on visiting. Again, a lot of this is, if I can put it this way, Mrs. McParland, familiar territory to us because we've heard a lot about this. But you talk about the initial restrictions. You say no window visits were allowed at that time. That's in March 2020. It's paragraph 31.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That lasted for about 2 weeks. You only had one call with your mum during that time. That I presume is a telephone call.
Telephone call, yes.
Yeah. How effective or useful was that?
Mum, she could be lucid at times, and I do remember that she was talking to us and saying my name and things like that, but it didn't really, I didn't feel peaceful afterwards because I didn't feel she sounded like herself, and she was still a bit confused, whether it was due to her dementia or, you know, at that early stage, even not seeing us for 2 weeks would have been difficult for my mum, because she was used to seeing us daily, so it wasn't desperately effective. It was good to hear her voice, but it wasn't.
You progress on to window visits. Again, material that we've heard before, and what you say about window visits we've heard from others.
Yes.
They weren't very good.
No. Not at all.
And you say you did over 200 window visits between March and October.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And that would have been more than one a day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was periods of lockdown in between, so sometimes it was even more than
Yes. Yes. In that period, did you notice, even through window visits, any deterioration in your mum's condition?
Yes, I did.
What sort of deterioration did you notice?
I noticed on a number of occasions that she was just more drowsy. It was difficult to communicate in any case, but looking through the closed window, I mean, if I'd been going in to visit her and I'd seen her drowsy, it wasn't completely abnormal that she would be drowsy and asleep when I went in to visit her indoors, but looking through the closed window, I couldn't waken her, obviously, or nudge her and bring her round, so a lot of the window visits, she was just lying, head down in the chairs.
Yeah. You do mention subsequently in your statement the possibility that your mother may have been sedated.
Yes.
Do you think that was the case?
It may have been, but there were occasions when my mum, due to her dementia and the type of dementia she had, that she did require some sedation, just a mild sedation. So I can't say for definite, but there's a possibility that...
I mean, this is not meant as a criticism of the care home or in any way. I'm just asking for a possible explanation of your mother's drowsiness, if I put it that way.
I think there would be times that she would have been sedated, yes.
You say at paragraph 34 of your statement that the information that you were getting about outbreaks of COVID, closed window visits, and then subsequent open window visits were confusing. Yeah. You say very ambiguous. Yeah. This was information you were receiving from the care home?
From the care home and from the HC1 themselves.
Yeah. So from the care home and the care home operator. Yeah. And you say communication wasn't that great and guidance was constantly changing. Is that you saying that, first of all, that there was poor communication from the care home?
Yes.
And also that the guidance that you were being given was a moving feast. It was constantly changing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was that as a result of what the care home was doing, or do you know if that was the result of more general and higher level guidance that was given by government or
My thoughts are it was a bit of both, actually. I think no one was really sure what was happening. When I spoke to anybody on the occasion that I did in the care home, sometimes I could give evidence before the carers or the nurses in the unit. I could not give evidence. I could say what had been happening in some of the guidelines. So I think that from the management down in the care home that nobody really was being informed clearly as to what was happening. It seemed to just be a moving goalposts all the time. It just
and presumably you as a qualified nurse, interest in caring, interest in public health, and also with your specific interest in gaining access to your mother.
Yes.
You would presumably, or were presumably, informing yourself about the changes in guidance or the guidance that was applicable at any one time.
Yes, and through Care Home Relative Scotland as well.
Yeah. When did you become involved with Care Home Relative Scotland?
It was in 2020. I have written it somewhere, but it was just a bit before, maybe a month or so before my mum died.
Okay. One of the points you make at paragraph 36 is that you were told that your mum's 6-month assessment was due. And as I understand it, you were asked if you had any input into that.
Yes.
And could you have had?
From what I was seeing through the window, but how was that? How was I able to assess how my mum was? How was she feeling, etc., which is what they did ask at assessments. How do you feel your mum's managing? How do you think she's feeling? Is she settled, etc.? I was shocked to be asked to comment because hadn't been effectively near my mum to know. I had expressed my concerns that what I saw and what I assumed was happening, but I felt I was pretty shocked to be asked to respond to how my mum was.
I'm sorry. I think what you do say at paragraph 36 is that you did say, in the context of this request, that your mum was, as you put it, really affected by isolation and lack of contact with us.
Yes.
Again, how did you come to that view that was the position? Because can I just interject before you answer the question? I suppose it could be said that your mother's condition was an ongoing decision and would be a deteriorating condition.
Yes.
And this might be a reflection of the ongoing and deterioration of her condition. But I think you are attributing it to a certain extent to the isolation and the lack of contact with you. Can you perhaps give a little explanation of why you're saying that?
Yeah. What I knew my mum better than anybody, and in spite of not being with her, I knew how important it was for her to have contact, stimulation, distraction, all this in her day-to-day life. Mum was never one for just being sitting alone and not talking to people. She was very much a people person. But on days, even at home, when she was in the care home as well, there were some days that she was a bit low, and possibly due to her condition. But the difference was when we would go in, and when I was in visiting, or when there was a concert or something on, Mum came alive again, to put it that way. So I knew that I knew just from her own personality that this would be really difficult for my mum, having people round about, not having people to chat with. And I do remember as well, because the bit about, I did say Mum was really affected by isolation, because I do remember the carer saying to me, your mum said she's very, 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 very happy in the care home. And that's what my response to that was, but please, I want this documented, because that's not what's coming across to us. It's not what we're seeing on a window visit, or the physical appearance of Mum, or just whole demeanour was not very, very happy.
You perhaps give a little more context to that in paragraph 40 of your statement. And you said you were worried about the physical and emotional effects on your mum, being very anxious, confused, hallucinating, and no one having time to sit with her to reassure her.
Yes.
That presumably was an important, or had been an important part of your function.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
She needed that, Mum. She really did.
Yeah.
That would settle her. Even just holding her hand, knowing that we were there.
Yeah. And you conclude that paragraph by saying my mum needed this type of support, reassurance and care.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So your presence and your physical touch.
Touch.
And reassurance, presumably.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Paragraph 41, you say, I should have persevered to get clear answers. But you go on, but my heart was broken. What do you think you should have done, and what answers did you want?
I've probably written a bit down here, sorry. I felt I should have pushed a bit more to be with my mum. I felt that I should have been, I felt the staff could have been more open with me. When I was saying what I was feeling about my mum, I just always got the reply that she was fine, or very, very, very happy.
Do you believe that?
No. No. But I just feel as though it was very difficult to communicate anyway, to get a phone call or answer a phone or whatever, which I completely understand. Carers were very busy. But I just feel now I wouldn't have accepted she's fine. I didn't accept it at the time, but I didn't do anything about it. Whereas now I would have asked them to define what is fine.
Yeah. Did you know anything at that time about being an essential carer?
Sorry,
Did you know anything about being an essential carer?
Not at that point.
No.
So.
That wasn't mentioned to you by the care home staff?
No.
With probably the benefit of now a bit of hindsight, how do you feel about not being told about that?
Betrayed, awful, guilty. Could have possibly been with my mum sooner.
A couple of points as we're going on, Mr. McParland. One of the points you make at paragraph 43 is that there was a concern that you had about the continuity of staff.
Yeah.
You were seeing, presumably, new faces when you were
at the window.
At the window.
Yeah, there's constantly new staff, and I knew all the staff day and night duty pre-COVID because I was with them all the time. I recognised all the staff. I would have known them by name, but at the window, no, there was faces, new faces rushing back and forth, working in the unit, very, very busy. And I noticed there was new residents as well, from what I could see.
Yeah. You tell us a little bit, not in this section of your statement, but you tell us a little bit about your knowledge of barrier nursing.
Yeah.
We don't need to go to it just at the minute, but you were aware of what barrier nursing was.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel that somebody who had that knowledge and could go into a care home having taken the necessary precautions, such as is necessary with barrier nursing, should have been allowed into the care home to see a loved one?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Your mother's 89th birthday was on the 17th of September 2020.
Yeah.
And you had, as you put it, an outdoor visit, sitting 3 feet away from her with masks on. I think that's you and other family members.
Yes.
And you were told not to touch or kiss her at all. And you say it was horrible and devastating.
Yeah.
I think we can understand that. I don't think you need to explain that any further. But I think she had been, how do I put it politely, glammed up for the
She was.
yes, for the occasion.
She was. She looked beautiful.
And I think it's interesting what you say in paragraph 45 is that you felt that your mother didn't have the same amount of trust in you.
No. Again, I don't think it was in relation to her condition worsening.
Yeah.
I'm convinced it was her eye contact wasn't there. She seemed to be making more reference to the carers who were round about, as in motioning to the carers. I remember her, her gifts, her cake, these type of things. She just wasn't engaging with us.
Yeah. And you took that on yourself?
I did, very much so.
Yeah.
That, again, I felt so guilty at having left her all that time and her not understanding why.
Yeah. You mention the analogy with prisoners in paragraph 46, and again, this is something we've heard from many witnesses now. Do you feel, or can you know, whether your mother shared that view?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know if my mum, the tape and all put up, I don't know if my mum would have, I don't think it would have, I don't know that it would have crossed her mind, but it certainly felt like it to us, or to myself and my sister. It was an open door visit.
Now, you started to notice a deterioration in your mother. You mentioned in paragraph 47 that she looked awful during a particular outdoor visit, and you say she'd looked like she'd given up.
Yes.
And that was, in fact, a couple of weeks before she died.
Yes.
Yeah. You had a concern, I think, that she was very dehydrated.
Yes.
And you then say that isolation was definitely having an effect on her.
Yes.
Did that make you more convinced as to what was the cause, or what was a possible cause of her deterioration?
Yes, I mean, she was becoming more frail, certainly. I could see that her weight looked less, her colour wasn't good, her demeanour had changed again, so she was more frail, and probably her cognitive abilities had declined, but I think it was just hastened by the fact that she wasn't getting the stimulation and the visits from myself, my sister, my brother that she would normally have got.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you had a power of attorney.
Yes.
In relation to your mother, but as you say in paragraph 48, that was disregarded.
It was just completely, totally.
What would you have wanted to do under the power of attorney? What were you thinking that you might achieve by relying on the power of attorney?
I suppose at that stage, I think I really just wanted something. I felt I needed something legal, for want of a better word, that would help people or make people listen, and realise how much I wanted to be with my mum, and the fact that I had this power of attorney and I was her voice. I thought that I suppose I was just clinging to the hope that this was one legal document that may well have got us in to see my mum. But
did you try to invoke the powers under the power of attorney and sort of flash it in front of the staff and try and say, I've got this, I want to get in?
I did say
And what was
that,
the response to it?
It didn't mean anything. And plus it was the staff that I would have been saying that to as well. No disrespect, but we're very, very busy carers and the odd qualified registered nurse, so possibly it didn't mean anything really to them either. No disrespect intended at all.
No. Okay, you became aware of the Care Home Relative Scotland group.
Yes.
And I think we've heard from representatives of that group, and we know the work that they did in an unofficial capacity in making people in your position aware of the situation.
Yes.
And I think you did find the companionship that you got through that group reassuring, in that you found others who were in the same position as you.
Yes, absolutely. And that was really important at that time, to just think you're not going off your head, that other people do have these feelings too and are experiencing similar.
Yeah, you tell us about a situation that arose. This is in paragraph 50 and 51. Can you just tell us a little bit about this? That effectively, I think you say it's a sort of breach of confidentiality of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us what happened?
I felt strongly. So it was going back to the outdoor visits that Mum seemed really, really thirsty. And she wasn't talking, her mouth was really dry. She just looked a poor soul, as I say, really frail. So I had asked if my mum could have a drink, and the carer immediately brought Mum a full tumbler of water, and Mum drank the full tumbler on the one go, which wasn't like her at all. And she put her wee hand up to ask for another tumbler of, well, you know, and she, not asking for another tumbler, really, pointing that she wanted more. And she then drank that full tumbler of water as well, which was unusual. That I had went, I'm sorry if I'm just trying to put that wee bit into context, because
please go on.
What had happened, I was really upset. I thought my mum was, because she was non-verbal in that meeting, but again, because her mouth was so dry, it might have been one of the reasons. But I was deeply concerned, and this was one of the things about not being with her. I was always there to give her her drinks, and even some ice lollies or ice cream or yogurts or something like that. So I said to the carer, can my mum still ask for a drink? I don't remember if she replied to me, but I think there was a sort of emotion that she could, but there was no verbal reply. I felt really afraid and really devastated, the fact that possibly my mum is dehydrated, and maybe that's where my nursing hat came on, and I started thinking of all the consequences of dehydration in terms of, you know, heart, all the things. So I went on to the Care Home Relatives group, and I put in a post on, just, it was a way of releasing and saying, you know, I'm really concerned today, and went over what I've just explained. And I got some really good replies. There was some comments on the post. Some of them were, you take this further, and, you know, yeah, you're right, your mum could be dehydrated, this is very concerning. Yeah, take this further. But I had in my post had said that I didn't apportion any blame on any of the staff, any of the carers, or any of the nurses. I was absolutely just concerned, not just, but I was absolutely concerned that my mum was dehydrated. So the next day, I think it was, I received a phone call. Is this a bit of just to go on to? Yeah,
just tell us about what
it was. Maybe the next day, and I know exactly where I was when the phone call came in. It's had such an impact. I received a phone call from the deputy manager, whom I had never met. It was a new deputy manager in the care home. One to say she had heard I wasn't, I don't think she said the word accepting, but it was in the lines of I wasn't taking it very well, that I was locked out from being with my mum. But she quickly followed that on with, you have really upset all of my staff by your posting on social media. And I couldn't think at that stage. I didn't know what she was referring, to what she was referring. It then dawned on me that it would be my post in Care Home Relatives Scotland group. And I said to her at the time, that's a private group. Actually, it wasn't private at that time. So it turned out that it was actually the nurse in the unit had actually seen my post on social media, on Facebook, on Care Home Relatives Scotland group. She had edited the post about Mum being very thirsty and wanting drinks, and I was really concerned about her. She'd edited all that, omitting the bit about I wasn't apportioning blame to anyone. I was just, I was afraid. I was looking for some reassurance, some advice, some clarity around it. But she edited this and sent it to one of her staff on their personal phone. The staff member then sent this round the rest of the staff in Mum's unit. I was horrified.
So far as your ongoing relationship with the care home was concerned, after that, what effect did that have on it?
On my mum or on myself?
On you?
I was a bit intimidated, I must say. And this was me probably, but I did feel that they seen me then as some sort of a troublemaker, somebody that was going to be a telltale, somebody that was going to be criticising, somebody that was going to be taking, out bad press. That wasn't there was no intention of that. There was no criticism, but that's how it made me feel. I was really disappointed that this breach of confidentiality had occurred. Confidentiality is really important to me and always was during my mum's stay in the unit. The care home knew that. I was also terrified that it would have an impact on Mum.
Yeah. You did try to make some phone call. Well, you made some phone calls about the possibility of moving your mother back to your home, presumably your home. Or,
my home, yes.
And unfortunately, that couldn't take place. No. Then in early October, mid-October 2020, you were told that your mother had a cough and that she was being tested for COVID.
Yes.
And subsequently, a couple of days later, you were told that she had a positive result.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, maybe obvious, but what was your reaction to that?
I was afraid. My first thought was, I need to be with my mum.
Yeah.
I want to be with my mum. I was afraid. I didn't think that. I felt she had become more frail in any case, and I really wasn't sure. Was she going to survive this, and how was she going to be on her own, feeling so unwell?
Yeah. I think you had a conversation with the GP practice that covered your mother's care home, and the GP did try to reassure you that there would be medication, and I think there was a mention of the just-in-care box of medication for end-of-life palliative care.
Yeah.
Paragraph 55, you say that you asked if you could come into the care home and be with her.
Yeah.
And you were told that the guidelines had to be consulted and that they would get back to you.
Yeah.
But you say they never returned your call.
No, never returned.
Did you persist?
Yes. I just kept on asking, but the response I would get was, well, your mum's not end of life, and you'll only be permitted end of life. And if that wasn't potentially end of life with an 89-year-old frail lady with COVID, then I don't know.
Yeah. Now, Jen, I asked you earlier about barrier nursing.
Yeah.
That's probably what you were looking for at the time.
Yeah.
I should have told you the paragraph, my fault.
That's okay.
So this is you bringing your nurse's hat on and telling us about barrier nursing, which is something that you were very familiar with.
Yes, I was actually. It was something that we did practice while I was working in hospitals.
Yeah. So there wouldn't have been any doubt that you could have exercised the necessary precautions if you had been allowed in to see your mother.
Yeah, and I felt 100% that I could have cared for my mum safely. I suppose I would have been reverse barrier nursing if it, to put it that way, and you know, because you've got barrier nursing whereby you're protecting the staff member is protecting themselves against the infected person, or reverse, you know, where the protected.
I suppose you could have been doing both.
Sorry, yes, absolutely, yeah.
And the other point you make in paragraph 58 is that you also understood the impact of isolation on patients.
Yeah.
Now, I take it from what you say there that this isn't informed just by the experience you had in relation to your mother. This is something you knew.
Yeah, it's a public health. What's the word? I would say it's not emergency. Do you mind if I look at my
Please do.
my notes? It's a risk. Sorry, it is. It's a public health risk, and it's identified as being a risk to the public if people are kept in isolation, whether that be in a home setting or wherever. People do need others in their lives, and if they don't, it's in terms of public health speaking. You know, if people don't have this communication, if they're left isolated, very often they develop other morbidities or conditions, heart disease, etc. So,
as a public health nurse, was that something you knew about from your training?
Yes.
So you didn't need to have the experience of the pandemic to know that?
No.
And I think you say, perhaps we've already dealt with this, but in paragraph 59 you would have been prepared to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
And you could have entered through a door which wouldn't have taken you into contact with other people.
Yes, no contact.
And I think you say that you were willing to be tested and indeed isolate and care for your mother.
Sorry, yes.
You do say, I suppose, trying to almost surmise what your mother's reaction would have been. You do say at paragraph 62 that your mother really wasn't consulted on this.
No.
Could she have been?
I think that she would have been able to maybe not give a big verbal response, but I think she could have been included in some of the, as I said, the type of dementia that my mum had. She would have lucid spells. So I think if earlier on, you know, after lockdown, if mum had been included or involved in some conversation or some discussions or decisions, she would have contributed.
And of course, I suppose also one could say that let's assume your mother couldn't make that contribution towards that discussion. There was, or should have been, somebody who could advocate on her behalf, and that would have been you.
That would have been me, yeah. I've always referred to it as being a voice for my mum, because her voice had been taken away from her.
You make the point, and again, it's something we've heard from a number of witnesses, and I don't really want you to give a long explanation of it, because I'm not entirely sure even I, as a lawyer, can give a long explanation of it. But you say that basic human rights were taken away from her.
Yeah.
What were those human rights you saw?
To be with her family, to make decisions, to make choices where she could within her own realm of understanding. The right to fresh air, the right to sunshine, the right to go out to the shops. Just daily living. Everything seemed to be so institutionalised and so restricted that she just she'd no choice, I don't imagine, in anything. I think she would be a bit like a robot, getting up in the morning, getting dressed. In fact, sometimes the residents weren't getting dressed because I believe the impact on staff, so sometimes the night clothes were just changed, which wouldn't have been my mum because she wouldn't have sat about in her night clothes, but just a basic breathing fresh air, being allowed to talk to whom or whoever she wanted to, being allowed to choose her food, just every...
Yep. On a slightly darker matter, there was do not attempt resuscitation in relation to your mother.
Yeah.
And were you aware of that?
Yes, that happened before my mum went into the care home, and I'd had the discussion with the medical staff and my brother and sister about that. My mum not, but I don't think they would have, if I'm allowed to put this part in, but I think, many people in care homes, the assumption is made that they will not resuscitate, where I don't think that should be the case in all cases, but when I seen how frail my mum was, even if there had been something, if there hadn't been a do not attempt resuscitation in place, I would have doubted that the medical staff would have
attempted it.
Attempted anyway. It would have been futile, possibly.
Yeah. Okay. Subsequently, you and your daughter, your daughter-in-law, tested positive for COVID.
Yeah.
And that was a few days after you were told that your mother had tested positive for COVID. And as a consequence of that, you had to shield for 12 days following your test, and that ended on the 27th of October into the 28th of October at midnight. Just as you were approaching the end of that period of isolation, you contacted the then First Minister's office and spoke to a member of staff, as you put it, in a desperate bid to be at my dying mother's bedside.
Yes.
Were you given an update during this period of your own isolation as to how your mother was, having tested positive for COVID?
Yes. I remember the weekend, that was the Sunday morning, I think. I was being kept up to date by one of the trained nurses in the unit, who I didn't know she was from either another unit or possibly a bank nurse, but she was keeping me updated. But I don't know if I'm going on to the next bit, because after it was my sister and brother who kept me updated. They
were able to give you that information, and we don't need to go into the precise details of that. You were, you say you were at paragraph 67, you'd been in the car park overnight and you were begging to be let in. And you spoke to public health, to the care home, and you were eventually able to get in to be with your mum for about 10 minutes wearing PPE.
Yeah.
And I think you were still, as you say, technically shielding, but this was, as you put it, an off-the-record, compassionate 10-minute visit. Were you appreciative of that?
Was I appreciative? Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was in the car park in the car for 2 nights because it was my choice. I just needed to be as near as possible to my mum.
Yeah.
And I also thought I could have stood outside her patio door, but no.
Yeah.
So it was an off-the-record 10-minute with someone who I would say had a lot of common sense in NHS Lanarkshire Public Health.
You were able to get into the, be reunited with your mum at midnight.
Yeah.
And she died 4.5 hours later.
Yeah.
And you say that although her death was peaceful, her previous night was awful.
It's awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah. And again, are you, how can I put it, annoyed that you were not there to comfort her through that previous night?
Yeah. But so was my sister and brother, actually, because the nurses were really putting a lot of decision-making on them in terms of administering just-in-case medication, and that shouldn't have been the case.
Okay, after your mum's death, you got the impression, I think, that you were being rushed to get out of the care home.
Yes.
And you were out of the room within an hour as the undertakers had arrived. Is that right?
Yes, I just felt that, you know, as soon as Mum passed, the nurse had said to me, actually, my mum passed so quickly after being reunited with her. And the nurses came into the room and I alerted them, and they came in and the nurse confirmed my mum's death, which I find strange, that no doctor confirmed my mum's death. As far as I'm aware, nurses don't confirm death, although I could be entirely wrong. Or was this something that happened during COVID and during lockdown? But yes, I felt the nurses wanted me away as quickly as possible. Perhaps they had nowhere else for me to go. I mean, when someone dies, or my experience of nursing someone at their end of life is it's a privilege to be allowed to do that. And after death, the dignity should still remain with the dead person, but the nurse just wanted me out the room. And just incidentally, I was so traumatised at Mum dying so quickly. My first reaction as a nurse, but I wanted to start resuscitating my mum. That was just, I had got her back and then I'd lost her again.
No.
So.
Understand that. Your mum had a small funeral, 20 people in attendance. You couldn't touch her coffin. Again, I think this is material with which we are familiar. You tell us a little bit about PPE.
Yeah.
And this again is your nurse's hat coming on.
Yes.
And paragraph 74, you say infection prevention and control was going to be an issue with what I viewed as minimal PPE being worn.
Yeah.
Where were you seeing this minimal PPE being worn?
Through the window of the care home.
Yeah. And you say that you couldn't believe that a plastic apron, gloves and a proper paper mask were supposed to be enough.
Yeah.
What would you have expected?
At a minimum, a gown, a nurse wearing a gown, not a plastic apron. I know that we have to think of the residents, and I know that, you know, some would probably have been really afraid. That they would have been probably in any case, or possibly. And to see someone in a HAZ suit, for example, and, you know, the respirator, the bigger mask, I wasn't meaning anything like that, but I thought the minimum that a nurse could have been wearing was a gown that wrapped around the whole uniform, because touch and residents feeling, touching nurses' uniforms, touching pieces of equipment, you know, I didn't feel that was any protection. And in a communal area as well, you know, I hadn't. It shocked me. It really did shock me that this was full PPE. That's the way it was described, as full PPE.
You've got a general section in your statement from paragraph 77 onwards. And again, I don't want to take you through the detail in there because I think it would probably upset you. I don't want to do that. But the points you make, can I say, are points we have heard.
Okay, yeah.
And we are very aware of these points. I think, interestingly, and again, it's perhaps obvious, paragraph 79, well, perhaps you would just read the first sentence of that paragraph 79.
79. I want people to know that my mum and other residents were individual human beings, some of whom understood the situation of lockdown and many who did not understand.
And I think you go on to say that you want your mum's voice to be heard.
Yes.
And remembered via the statement that you made.
Yes.
And I think you conclude that paragraph by saying there was disrespect for people in care homes.
Yes.
And that's the view you still maintain.
Yes, yeah. I think just they were just not seen as being human beings of value. Mm-hmm. I felt they were looked down on and weren't considered as they were more labelled as the illness or the condition that they had, as rather than being a human being like all of us.
Yeah. I don't want to take you in any detail through support in bereavement, but I think you have suffered as a consequence of the bereavement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we can read that. It's not necessary. And that probably led you to become involved with the care home relatives group Lost Loved Ones.
Yes.
Because obviously not everybody in the group lost somebody.
No.
So that there was another group that was set up. And I think you took with you into that group your experience of the invasion of your privacy and confidentiality that occurred on the earlier Facebook page.
Yeah, I did. I actually set up this group myself. But yes.
What was the purpose of setting it up?
Initially, after Mum died and I was still I was in Care Home Relatives Scotland group, and the homes were starting to open up a bit more, well, depending on what the guideline was at that time, but some visitors were being allowed in to visit loved ones, and I was delighted that that was the case, that people were being reunited and visitors were being allowed in. There was also vaccines now being started to be administered. However, I felt that the group was still very good, very proactive, very inspiring and giving hope. I felt that I needed somewhere separate to actually grieve and channel the angst, and I set up the group Lost Loved Ones, still at Care Homes Relatives Scotland, Lost Loved Ones, but it was a way to channel that sadness and that angst and that despair.
I think you conclude really with paragraph 95 of your statement by, I suppose, making certain final comments, but looking at it in the context of the group that you'd set up.
Yes.
And what you say is that we were robbed of being able to spend time with our loved ones. The aim is to ensure that this will never happen to anyone else, to make sure our loved ones are not forgotten, and that common sense prevails. As a public health nurse and somebody who is clearly experienced in nursing and carers, as well as in a professional capacity as well as your own. What do you think common sense should have told people?
I think it was the common sense was the simple things that were right in front of our eyes. I felt nobody was looking at the individuality of this situation. I felt it was all being medicalised, and being a public health nurse, I suppose, as well. Public health it's not the same as being a nurse and caring for someone who's ill and looking after their illness, their needs, etc. The common sense approach, which I think public health does take, is it's looking at the population, in this case the population of the care home, and really thinking, they're in a care home, some have medical conditions, most had dementia, but they were essentially people with needs who needed support, and that could be seen. That to me was just nobody had looked at the whole aspect of just living your daily life. Everything was around this pandemic, and there was chaos everywhere. Everybody just seemed to be frightened or looking beyond what was actually an individual sitting in front of you. Nobody seemed to recognise that these were individuals with needs, and it wasn't rocket science. We didn't need yes, we had to be careful, but what we really needed was what was in here, that empathy, that understanding, that ability to listen and to make a decision. And I felt strongly that the common sense went out the window, and everybody just went by what was being instructed or guided. Nobody stopped.
You kept a lockdown diary for every day that your mum was locked away from you. Hazard to say, it's probably more interesting on some of the other lockdown diaries that have been published.
Yeah. I could see every day what the other lockdown diary, what they were doing in their diary. I could see what I was doing in mine, and it certainly wasn't in any way remotely similar.
You've also provided the inquiry with a considerable number of documents. And as I've indicated to you, these documents, we'll go through the list of the documents you provided, and we will ask your solicitor to whom you've given these documents to provide them to us so that they can be added to the wealth of your evidence. That's really all I've got to ask you. Mrs. McParland, thank you very much for your coming and giving your evidence. I know it's not been easy, but we are very grateful to you.
Thank you. Would I have time to just chat a wee bit about lost loved ones? Or time?
What do you want to say?
I'm just trying to say that group, the prolonged grief that is very evident through that group. Just to inform the inquiry that it's not normal grief that we're going through. We're really.
If it's of any comfort to you, we have some academic research that is available to us, and one other witness has already spoken about prolonged grief disorder, so it's something we are aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right, Mrs. McParland, thank you very much for your help.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mrs. McParland. Very good. Should we say 25 past?
Yes, more.
Thank you. No, thank you. Now, I don't think I know, the next witness is going to be done remotely, Mr.
That's
Caskey, is that
correct,
correct? So, is this one of the ones where we are the only people that can see the witness?
No,
this is- we're open.
Mr. Gray has joined us.
I see
Hello,
that.
Mr. Gray.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. And if I can just remind Mr. Gray that we're not naming in your evidence any of the healthcare staff that dealt with you, but we can name the institutions that you were in and also your mum and your sister. Sorry, not your sister, just your mum, okay? Would you tell the inquiry your full name, please?
Neil Gray.
Right, sorry, I just would like to check some things about the sound. I'm not entirely clear the sound is great. So, do you support a football team?
Yes, I do. I'm an Aberdeen supporter.
I'm really sorry, sir.
It's better than many of the other answers.
Right, that's not going to harm your evidence directly, but I just
even
wanted
indirectly.
I just wanted to check that we could hear you okay. And we can. Okay.
I'm not sure we can, actually.
Well,
Can you say 1, 2, 3?
1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
fine.
fine.
Can everyone here in the room? Yeah, good.
good.
That's fine then, thank you. On you go, Mr. Caskey.
Thank you. What age are you?
I'm 49.
And I understand that you have had lifelong disabilities.
That's correct.
Okay, I understand that there are 3 major medical incidents which happened in your life. The first is at birth you were born with a congenital condition which resulted in spina bifida, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then in 2008 you suffered a catastrophic stroke.
Yes.
Can you tell me about your life from when you were born until you suffered your stroke?
Really, I know this is strange, but I didn't actually think of myself as disabled until I had the stroke, because I had never done anything different, so I didn't really see what the big problem was.
Prior to the stroke, were you in a wheelchair?
Yes. At one point I used calipers and crutches, and then I moved, as I got older, and obviously grew, moved on to a manual wheelchair.
Right, and again, prior to 2008, were you able to work?
Yes, I worked full-time, even after the stroke, until 2019.
And what did you work as?
Aberdeenshire Council in ICT,
Right, ICT being?
Information and Communication Technology.
Right. Now, again, I want to ask you a question about the stroke. After you suffered the stroke, did you have to undergo rehabilitation?
Yes, I did.
And one of the places that features later in your story was one of the places that you got rehabilitation for after your stroke.
Yeah.
What place am I talking about?
That would be Craigport.
Craig Court. So you went in there for rehabilitation after your stroke, and then you were back in there later in the process, if I can put it that way.
Well, the second time it was more to do with COVID, but yes, that's correct.
Okay. I said there were 3 major events, medical events, that affected you, and we've spoken about 2 of them. I believe the third that arises relates to your shoulder. Can you tell us about that?
When I had my stroke, my right side was paralysed, So I basically lost use of the arm. And I also broke, later on, I actually broke my shoulder. So it doesn't, basically it's useless.
Okay. I believe that for the earlier part of your life, you lived with your mum and dad.
That's correct, yes.
And when did that end? When did you stop living with your mum and dad?
December 2020, I believe, yeah.
Your statement says February 2020. Would that be correct?
Sorry, yes, that would be, apologies.
Okay. You've been over this statement, yes?
Yes,
And the content of it is true, so far as you recall?
absolutely, yes.
And you want Lord Brailsford to take account of all of the content of it in reaching his conclusions?
Yes, please.
Right. That means that I don't need to take every word, because Lord Brailsford will proceed on the basis that every word within it has passed from your lips today because you've adopted it.
That's fine.
Okay, now paragraph 4, you say, whilst you were living with your mum and dad, you had been struggling for a while getting from the bed to the wheelchair.
Yes.
And how did, was there a specific incident that meant you could no longer do that, or did it simply drift away?
No, it had been struggling for some time, but there was one incident when I couldn't actually transfer from a toilet onto my wheelchair. And at that point, I had to go into hospital.
Right, and would that be Aberdeen Royal Infirmary?
That's correct, yes.
Right, now, you went in there, I think we said, in February 2020.
Yes.
And then COVID had hit in March.
Yes, that's right.
What was the hospital, as far as you were concerned, did the impact or did the arrival of COVID have an impact on where you were living?
Absolutely, yes.
Uh-huh.
As soon as COVID really hit, I was moved out to Deeside Care Home.
Right, and were you given any explanation as to why you were being moved from Aberdeen Royal Infirmary to Deeside Care Home?
Just because there were so many cases of COVID hitting the hospital, to be frank, they just needed the beds.
And at that point, could you not have gone home?
No, because I still had the issue with my shoulder. And as I say, it basically completely packed in. So there would have been no way for me to do the transfers I had done previously in my parents' home setting.
Okay, how were you transferred from ARI to Deeside Care Home?
Ambulance.
Ambulance. Were you given any choice? Were you involved in the selection of the care home?
Absolutely no.
None. Do you recall if you were tested for COVID when the transfer was taking place?
I know I was tested in ARI, but it was quite a while after that, before they started testing me at Deeside.
And when you were in ARI, were you able to get out of the bed? Were you able to go to the toilet?
No. Unfortunately, I was pretty much bedbound.
Right. So you're now in Deeside Care Home. You've transferred there by ambulance.
Yes.
Were you told anything about what staff availability there would be to look after you?
Not really that much. Just that there were staff there if I needed any assistance.
And you obviously would need assistance because you had difficulty transferring into your wheelchair.
Absolutely, yes.
And were sufficient staff available at that time to help you in D-side?
In terms of numbers, yes. There was somewhat of a language barrier in some cases.
Okay. How long did you stay in D-side? Can you remember?
I have to be honest.
Your witness statement says from March 2020 until December 2020. Would that be accurate?
That would be, I would say that was accurate, yes.
Yeah, so you were in there for 9 months or thereabouts.
Yes.
Now, during the period that you were in D-side care home, what visits did you have?
I had one visit from my parents, which fell on my birthday.
Okay. Apart from that, did you see anyone else?
No.
And when you had been living at home with your parents, what about visitors there in the earlier period?
Well, yeah, it was just normal life for me, really. I saw my parents multiple times every day.
And how did you feel about, firstly, going into the care home, and secondly, about not having contact with your parents except that one day?
Well, I knew that there would be restrictions, I understood that, but it hit me really quite hard that I wasn't able to see them a lot more than.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gray, I don't know if you can hear me, but you've frozen on our screen, so I'm going to pause for a second so that someone can hit the machine on the side.
Yeah.
I think it may be back. No, possibly not.
Okay. Right. Sorry, we were saying about your mood. Tell us about that.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that at my end.
Sure, you said something about your mood, both by going in and by not being able to see your parents.
Yes, I found it very, very difficult not being able to see my parents because we're very, very close. I found that it did definitely affect my mental health.
And what about your sister? Did you see her at all?
We were able to talk on the phone, but not actually to see her.
Okay. And you mentioned that there was a visit on your birthday. Can you tell us about that?
Well, there was one room in D-side, which was actually supposed to be a hairdresser's, and I was able to see my parents through a window and talk to them with the window slightly open.
Okay, now I understand you have a sister, although I don't want you to give her name, but did you see your sister at all during the 9 months you were in D-side?
No, we spoke over the phone, but I never actually saw her.
And was speaking on the phone as good for you as seeing her would have been?
I would have to say no, but it was better than nothing.
How did you find out there were going to be restrictions on visitors?
Basically, that was explained to me later on. I believe there was a COVID case among the staff, if I remember correctly, and then we were told about this with the, restrictions on the visits. And
did you expect the restrictions to be as severe or as long as they were?
I have to say no. I didn't bargain on that.
Okay. I'm now, for the assistance of Lord Brailsford, I'm now at paragraph 15 of your witness statement. At paragraph 15, you say there was a problem with your bowel movements and the hoist that you required. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Right. it was basically the toilet in the room that I was in wasn't accessible to me.
Well,
So
so you were putting out, were you in your own room at Deeside?
Yes, it was.
And did it have an ensuite?
Yes, but unfortunately, both the toilet and the shower were up a step, which is no use to me.
Right. It might have well have been 1,000 miles away.
Yes.
Tell me about within the home. Were you able to move around within the care home?
In the beginning, yes, although we were restricted to one floor mainly, unless somebody from wheelchair care wanted to see me, then I might be able to move to a different area. But latterly, it was more stuck in a room, really.
Were you given any instructions regarding COVID when you got to Deeside?
Just really to wear a mask when we were mulling each other. You know, if I was with staff, then I would have to wear PPE.
And sorry, I interrupted you there. Please, can you repeat what you said just at the end?
In those situations, I would have had to wear PPE as would the staff.
Right. And how did you spend most of your day at Deeside?
Usually on my phone to be.
Were you in your chair, or were you in bed, or?
Well, there were times of both, but at one point I was stuck in bed because there was an issue with the heating in the room. Basically, completely packed up, so I had to stay in bed.
And how long did that go on for?
It was over a weekend at the very least, and into the following week, as I remember.
Okay, you said that you spent quite a bit of time on your phone.
Yes.
Was that something that you had done over the years? That was something you were familiar with?
Well, over the years, I have spent quite a lot of time in hospital, so I'm relatively used to.
When you're living at home with your parents, were you in contact with your GP and others involved in your medical care?
Absolutely, yes. I was very used to dealing with all levels of medical staff.
And did that continue when you went into the care home?
Sadly, no.
Why?
Well, to me, it appeared that they didn't realise I was used to dealing with those kinds of professionals. The assumption seemed to be that I lacked capacity. You know, they never really got to know me enough to know that I was used to dealing with these people. They just seemed to assume, like a lot of the other people in the care home, that I lacked capacity, which I also found quite difficult.
In what way difficult?
Well, basically, it was almost like they were trying to say I wasn't as mentally sharp as I am, because I've been dealing with doctors of all levels of medical staff since my mid-teens, I would say.
Did they carry out any kind of mental assessment on you when you went in?
None whatsoever.
So they were working on the basis of an assumption?
Yes.
What do you think informed that assumption?
I can only presume that because of a lot of the other people that were in that probably didn't have the same mental capacity that I did. And so there was just an assumption that they maybe didn't have time enough to get to know me. I mean, there were a lot of people in Deeside at the time.
And did that affect your mood?
Very much so.
Tell us about that.
I became very frustrated with the whole situation. So I would talk to my parents and on one occasion my sister over the phone, effectively to vent, if you understand me.
Yes, yes, I know what venting is. You spoke earlier about problems with the heating. Did you speak to your family about problems with the heating?
I did, yes.
And did that come to the attention of care home staff?
Very much so.
Well, firstly, how did it come to their attention?
My mum contacted the manager of D-side.
Uh-huh.
That was how it started.
What was the care home's reaction to that?
I think fury would be the phrase. On one occasion, I was talking to my sister on the phone, on my mobile phone, and the manager and another member of staff basically came into my room and started screaming and shouting at me about it.
I'll come back to that as a more general point. At paragraph 24 in your witness statement, you mentioned something about a licensing issue and whether or not the care home had updated the licence. We don't need to bottom that out with you. We've got your witness statement in relation to that. But let me ask you about rehabilitation. Did you get any rehabilitation for your shoulder in D-side?
None whatsoever.
I think you were taken in to D-side by ambulance. I'll ask you about where you went next in a moment, but I think you were taken out by ambulance as well.
That's correct, yes.
The paramedics or ambulance staff, did they have any comment in relation to things within the care home?
Yes, they did.
Uh-huh, and what were they?
They were pretty much horrified by the fact that a lot of the staff, some of the males in particular, were wearing their PPE masks below their beard, their moustache. In others, it was below their beard, so that wouldn't have really been effective.
Was there anything else that they commented to you about inside the care home?
The manageress had a rather large dog. I believe it's a rough collie it's called. But this rough collie was wandering in and out of people's rooms, whether there was no distinction as to who had COVID and who didn't. So the dog was basically wandering in and out of rooms of its own free will.
And no PPE?
Correct.
How many people were in D-side at the same time as you?
I can't be certain, but I believe it was over 50.
Over 50.
Well over 50.
Now, in your statement, you provide a figure for the number of people you believe died in D-side after you left. Can you tell us what that figure was?
Yeah. Well, at one point I thought it was 60-something, but
Sorry?
I now think that was maybe perhaps an overestimate.
So how many do you reckon?
Probably about half of the residents that were in at the time that I was.
And did you get COVID at that time?
Yes, I did.
And did that result in you leaving Deeside?
Yes, it did.
And where did you go?
By ambulance up to Aberdeen Royal Infirmary.
So you go back to Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, but this time with COVID. How seriously ill were you, do you think?
Well, I wasn't actually aware at the time, but the following few days, I discovered that the hospital had actually phoned my parents and told them not to be surprised if they received a phone call during the night, basically saying I hadn't made it.
How were you informed you were going to hospital?
Well, basically, there was a knock on my door. I can't remember which staff member it was, but somebody basically told me, get some stuff packed. You've tested positive. You're going up to Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, or the RI they referred to it as.
And were you given any advice or support as to what was going to happen to you?
Just that there was an ambulance going to be picking me up, and I needed to wear PPE for the transfer.
Right. Did you have visitors when you were in ARI?
No, there was virtually no visiting in ARI at that time.
And how, do you know how long you were in ARI?
It was a matter of months.
And was that in order to recover from COVID?
Yes.
Right. And were you given some novel treatments in the hospital?
Yes, I was given experimental at the time, plasma treatment from people who had actually survived it previously, and some antivirals.
But you did recover?
Yes, I did.
We're pleased about that. When you moved out of ARI, where did you go?
I went to Craigport.
And that was one of the places that you had been after you had suffered your stroke in 2008.
Yes.
So you get transferred to Craigcourt. Did you have to go into lockdown when you got there?
For a few days initially, yes.
And were you tested for COVID before and after the transfer?
Yes, that would be correct, yeah.
So you were tested in Aberdeen Royal Infirmary and also when you got to Craigcourt?
That's right, yes.
Okay. When you arrived at Craigcourt, we know you had been in there a number of years earlier. Had it changed?
Very much so.
In what way?
On my initial visit there was plenty of rehab for my shoulder reference sterling. But on the second admission to Craigport, all the rehab staff had moved out, presumably to avoid catching COVID.
So were there any rehab staff left at Craigcourt?
None whatsoever.
So this is the third institution you've been in where they don't have rehabilitation facilities, despite the fact you were taken into hospital because of a problem with your shoulder.
Yes.
Were your family allowed to visit in or around Craigcourt?
Not in the building, but we were allowed garden visits when there wasn't an episode of COVID in the building.
So if there was someone in the building with COVID, the garden visits stopped.
Exactly, yes.
And how often did you have garden visits?
Quite regularly when there was no issue with PPE at the time. Several times a week, I would say.
So you had frequent visits from your family. How did that assist you?
Well, it helped my mood dramatically. I was able to talk to my parents without the fear of anybody effectively listening into what I had said. I could be more frank.
And I think a plan was put in place for you to move out of Craig Court. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I had signed up for a flat.
And did you ultimately move to that flat?
Yes, I did. That's what I'm talking to you from now.
And that's where you live now?
Yes.
Did it take a while to organise that?
Very much so, yes.
Why was that?
Because, well, as I understand it, the previous occupant of the flat, the adaptations that were done for them weren't suitable for my needs. So there had to be quite a lot of changes made to the flat.
Since you moved to the flat and moved out of the care home, have you received rehabilitation?
None whatsoever, no.
So how is your shoulder?
Still very painful at times. It dislocates fit and bottom.
together now, Neil.
Okay.
So they'll be back on.
We're back on, Mr. Gray. Your name has been deleted from what will go up. Sorry, your address has been deleted. Lord Brailsford has asked me to point out that if you have any concerns about that breach of the restriction order, you are, of course, at liberty to withdraw your evidence. That would be entirely a matter for you.
Thank you.
I should also say that the recording of this, which will eventually appear on the YouTube channel, does not appear for about 3 days. And therefore, you do not need to make your mind up about withdrawing your evidence just now. You can think about it over the weekend, you can discuss it with your parents. You could, if you wanted to, take legal advice in relation to that. And if you contacted the inquiry at the beginning of next week and said that you wanted your evidence to be withdrawn and deleted, we could do it then. So we can, in fact, conclude your evidence now, but your position is preserved while you think about it over the weekend.
I have no intention of withdrawing the rest of my evidence.
Good. Well, I'm very grateful to hear that.
I'm grateful to you for that also. So I was going over the lessons learned, first of which was the assumption shouldn't be made against new arrivals in care homes not having capacity. That was the first one. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
That communication should be significantly improved.
Absolutely, yes.
And that there is better staff training regarding PPE.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions for you, Mr. Gray. Can I ask, have you managed to say everything that you think it was important for you to say to the inquiry?
Except for one point, yes.
And what was that one point?
I mentioned already about staff in one of the places and not having correct use of PPE.
Yes.
But I personally don't see why that, if family members were to wear PPE correctly, I don't see why that should really restrict access to family members who were.
Yes, we understand. So essentially what you're saying is that you regard PPE and restrictions on visits, for example, to be alternatives rather than additional to one another.
Yes, as long as visitors were wearing the correct PPE, I don't even see why they would not be able to interact with family members. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed for your evidence today. You're the only person so far, I think, who actually was a care home resident, and it's important that we hear your voice. Thank you for attending today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I'm very appreciative. Very good. That's all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Tuesday.
Tuesday, 10 o'clock. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.